a very warm welcome to Mr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia and the author of the evening, Lord Meghnad Desai, to yet another session of Kitaab. Kitaab is an initiative launched by Prabha Khaitan Foundation to organize book releases across multiple cities in India and overseas. This year, when the pandemic forced the world to hit the pause button, Prabha Khaitan Foundation tried its best to ensure that its patrons were not denied the regular dose of literature and culture. Recently, we've held virtual book launches for the works of Dr. Shashi Tharoor, Dr. Hamid Ansari, Ms. Meghna Majmudar, and Ms. Jyotsna Bhargava, Mr. Prem Prakash, to name a few. In the past, we've had the privilege of hosting book launches in person for India's most famous journalist duo, Mr. Veer Sanghvi and Ms. Seema Goswami, Australian author John Zabrowski, a best-selling writer of mythological fiction, Mr. Amish Tripathi, former minister and wildlife enthusiast, Ms. Beena Kak, motivational speaker Jasmine Waldman, and many other eminent writers. Today, we have all tuned in for the launch of Meghnad Desai's autobiography, Rebellious Lord, an autobiography. Meghnad Desai is a British economist and member of House of Lords in the British Parliament, a scholar of Marxian economics, political economy, monetary policy, and economic history. Lord Desai was chairman of the Gandhi Memorial Statue Trust, which helped raise the statue of Mahatma Gandhi in London's Parliament Square. He is currently chairman of the advisory body of the Official Monetary and Financial Institutions Forum. He has written over 30 books on economics, history, politics, and cinema, as well as fiction. He has also written columns for several newspapers and periodicals in the UK and India. He received the Pravasi Bharatiya Puraskar in 2004 and Padma Bhushan in 2008. In conversation with him is Montek Singh Ahluwalia, an Indian economist and civil servant who was the deputy chairman of the Planning Commission of India, a position which carried the rank of cabinet minister. Before starting the conversation with Lord Desai, I request Mr. Ahluwalia to formally launch the book, The Rebellious Lord. The floor is all yours, Mr. Ahluwalia.
Thank you. Well, first of all, let me say how pleased and honored I am to be invited to this book launch of my old friend Meghnad. Meghnad, do you mind if I don't call you Lord Desai? Maybe
Absolutely.
So I'm very pleased to be able to do this, and I think what I'm required to do is to actually show you the book, and here it is. I think Meghnad, you better hold it up too.
You are.
There we are. Well, very happy to release this book, and let me just very briefly say that I really enjoyed reading it. You know, as Priyanshi has indicated, Meghnad is a man of many parts. I mean, I think of him as an economist. I think of him as a movie theater and movie buff. He's also a politician of the Labour Party. He's a peer of the realm, a member of the House of Lords, and he's also a very prolific columnist who has been commenting on things in India. So it's really a very wide range of things that he's done. And some of this comes out in the book. But actually, the nicest thing about the book is that it takes you through the life of such a sort of broad-based, varied kind of set of experiences in a very, very light way. And innumerable names of people that we've all heard about sort of float through and float out. The style is very light, very easy reading. So I would strongly recommend it to anybody interested in Meghnad, anybody interested in economics, anybody interested, I guess, in the other things also, and certainly contemporary political developments around the world and domestically. Now, I've been asked to initiate a conversation, and I think I want to sort of start off I'll start off with Meghnad as an economist, because that's how I first got to meet him, and these other dimensions of his life, which enrich it hugely, were revealed to me only later. And what I want to draw attention to is that somewhere in the book he does mention that in the middle 1990s he wrote an essay on the economic policy of the BJP, which he says in the book was the first serious attempt to analyze the economic policy of the BJP. But unfortunately, in the book, he doesn't tell us what he actually said. So I think it would be very interesting if I were to ask him, why don't you tell us what you said then, but more importantly, has that remained the economic policy now? Because you wrote this in
Yeah.
1996, it's almost kind of
Yeah.
25 years
Well,
ago.
what I said is now apparently it's available in print. Was that BJP had a very muddled economic policy, that they hadn't really seriously thought through any of the issues, and a bit of it was Gandhi, and bit of it was sort of capitalist. They used to be called a traders party, but they were not really very in favor of capitalism. Deen Dayal Upadhyay, who's a kind of mentor for BJP, had this third way idea: neither capitalism nor socialism, but we are going to do something different because we're India, and of course because of Gandhi, we had to have this sort of Gandhi. So I mean, it was sort of a khichdi. I sort of more or less, but I read through all the manifestos. I mean, talk about suffering. I walked through all the manifestos of BJP. I think what really happened is that there was a tremendous evolution, very fast evolution. By the time they got into power in 1998 in an NDA coalition, uh, I think they began to, of course, the reforms had already happened, and reforms were successful. And the Rao Singh reforms had happened successful. And instead of opposing those reforms, they swam with the tide. And that was very important in my view. Now, I think what happens with Modi is that it is another phase of that, much more accepting of the global, sort of dynamics and so on. I think Congress always had some peculiar reservation. They would play, but they won't admit to playing. At least for the first Modi one, Modi said, fine, FDI, this, that, manufacture in India, and added cleanliness and gender things. So I think for a while, the manifestos I had read were totally irrelevant to what BJP actually did. So while I boast about it, I just wanted to show that I'm a masochist, and I read all sorts of things, despite their being not necessarily helpful. But it is very instructive to start taking BJP seriously in the early 90s, but nobody was taking BJP seriously.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a good point. I recall. I mean, you started commenting on India and so on, probably after the reforms. As a matter of fact, you joined the House of Lords. You were elevated to the House of Lords, pretty much at the time when the reforms were
Absolutely.
being unrolled in the middle of
Absolutely.
1991. So.
Absolutely.
At that time, you had a reputation. After all, you were a Labour peer, a long-standing member of the Labour Party, an academic who actually taught Marx. People here very often think that just because you taught Marx, then you must also be a Marxist. I have no idea, because the British have invented multiple definitions of what it means to be a Marxist, because all of them have a high opinion of Marx. I mean, unlike the attitude in the United States. But here, there was a general feeling that here's Meghnad, comes from the London School of Economics, belongs to the Labour Party, must be a dyed-in-the-wool socialist. But then, to everybody's surprise, I mean, you were very often heard making positive noises about the reforms, which I
Yes.
think your friends in Calcutta found very difficult to absorb. And I remember you telling me once that, one of them said to you, Meghnad, you have betrayed us all. And you said to him, no, I'm saying the same thing that we used to say in the 1970s. And you haven't got this incident in the book. That's why I'm repeating it. I'm saying the same thing that we used to say in the 1970s, that China's way is our way. You're the ones who've departed from it, because China had begun the reforms more than 10 years before India did. So how was, when you came and saw this happening, how was your interaction with the left? Do you think you persuaded them that they need to have a second thought?
Uh, Sadly, no. I mean, what is right that I was remembered for things which I had done in the 70s, even to 90. You see, in India, people are expected to tread the same path, no deviation. Early on, they label you, you're a Marxist, that's it, no further freedom of action, and you then have to play the role. Now, as I describe in my book, I have a number of evolutions in my thinking and so on. And actually, what I had said in my major article on India in the New Left Review was that there was no chance of communist revolution in India. I was very pessimistic, but it was New Left Review. And I was a Marxist, so I must be saying something right, and nobody read it. But then, of course, but for the 91 reforms, as I say, I made a major speech in Mumbai in 1993, the Exim Bank lecture, which was absolutely crowded out. And I said what a great thing Manmohan and Narasimha Rao had done, and how I had been waiting for something like this for many years. And that was apparently printed and then circulated. I always give lectures without any notes. It was printed and circulated, and at least among the cognoscenti in the planning commission, they knew that I was their friend and not the enemy. It's people outside just surprised. How can a man have two different ideas in his head? This. How can Meghnad be with Dharma Kumar, who's supposed to be right wing, and he's left wing? That's not allowed. So I had polluted my caste several times.
Very good, actually. I mean, I think we've all benefited from you adding this tremendous diversity. One of the interesting thing, I mean, people who study economics should look at what your book says at one point, because you didn't start off as a mathematical economist, but you got into it, worked with Larry Klein and company. And then there's a nice bit where you talk about extending the work of Goodwin. And let me actually read what you say, and it's rather interesting. It said, I had to acquire a knowledge of nonlinear differential equations, which was an easy task because the Delhi School of Economics had a good library. Now, this is the first time I've heard someone describe acquiring a knowledge of nonlinear equations is easy just because you have some books accessible.
That's right, indeed.
You must exemplify the attitude that people would like to have students develop, that irrespective of whether you think you can do it, if you try a little bit, you can.
Absolutely.
Have you actually been promoting that with the students that you met? Because that's a wonderful attitude for someone to have.
Yeah, one of the things I think will be reflected if people read my book is how much time, once I got into college, I spent in a library. I more or less had morning college, so I just afternoon was in a library, not going back home. At graduate level, then in wherever I went. I mean, basically libraries, and I can live in a library if you see behind me. And I think at that time, Delhi School of Economics had Russian mathematics books. And there's a book called Nonlinear Oscillations by Minorsky. And when Shukumar Chakravarti said, why don't you do something with this? I said, oh my God, I can't tell him I'm ignorant, because he would be shocked. So I said, yes, I will do that. And then I went into the library and there was this book. So I said, here I am, I'll sit down and I will work through it. And I hope also that my book tells everybody that it is possible to overcome obstacles like a maths block, which I had.
That's actually a wonderful story. I mean, anyone reading that, I mean, I thought that was fascinating, and I think students would be well advised to reflect on that, basically. One one other question that I have, and that is, you're a movie buff, a self-declared movie buff.
Yeah.
And we've always felt that movies sort of reflect what's happening to society. I mean, certainly in the way back in the 50s, I guess you
Mm,
might call it the original paean to globalization. It
mm.
was Raj Kapoor saying that
Indeed,
"Hota
yes.
hai Japani, patloon Hindustani, फिर भी
Exactly.
लाल टोपी रूसी, लेकिन दिल है Hindustani." That was a kind of a
Yeah.
move that he brought in a little bit of socialism, but also brought in the rest of the world. So over time, would you say that movies have been reflecting society in India just as accurately? I mean, what do today's movies, what message do they give?
No, I don't see today's movies as much as I used to see movies all day. But I always find it fascinating that what's called Bollywood or Hindustani cinema always tells India's story to it. Even as India's story changes, I mean, in the 1990s, we were globalizing and diaspora was important. So Shah Rukh Khan, sort of is there, running around and whatever Dulhania Le Jayenge, and then you suddenly have sort of things happening in New York with an Indian boy and an Indian girl, and so always and this. Raj Kapoor's Jis Desh Mein Ganga Behti was all about dacoits in the Chambal Valley, with Vinoba Bhave was talking about. So it has an ability, some uncanny ability, to tell the nation's story in an entertaining way. And I find that, I remember seeing Salman Khan's Bajrang Bhai, or whatever it's called, when he takes his girl to Pakistan, this mute girl to Pakistan. And it was so amazing that you would not see that big a thing about Bajrang Bali and all that in the Congress days. But in the BJP days, he is a Bhakt, Bajrang Bhakt, and so on. And it's fine. Everybody is happy with that. And then he, of course, gets into Pakistan and all that. So I find I mean, obviously, India is not a single story. So there is enough scope for different producers and writers to tell different sorts of stories. And of course, there are some virulent reactions, like with the Padmavat thing. People who had never heard of this Padmavati said 500 years ago, she's my aunt, she's my great aunt. How dare you insult my great aunt, and we'll burn you down. I mean, the passion that people show regarding a film. I mean, it's astonishing. Whatever recently somebody was saying about the suitable boy, that how could this Muslim be kissing his Hindu girl in television? But it's television. It is not even live. You know, people have this strong feeling, and I think I'm a great fan of Bollywood. I think it's an amazing thing. Including, of course, Southern films, but it always is very good at storytelling.
Mhm.
Storytelling with both content and entertainment, and that I
Well,
think is fantastic.
I mean, since you're a self-confessed history buff, also, have you ever written something which would basically say that, look, these are the 10 movies to watch in a sequence if you want to understand how India is moving? I'd be very
Well,
interested.
that's a
Look
very
at
good
Desai's
idea, and
choices.
I'll work on it. I'll work on it because I'm always being asked to write books because I just can, I like writing, and I think they say who are the 10 great politicians whose early death caused problem. I don't want to do that, but 10 films would be very nice for me to
But
do
I don't
because
mean that. I don't necessarily mean the 10 great films, because one
no,
can
no,
imagine.
no, no.
I mean
I
the
know
10
exactly
great
what you
films that tell the story of India's
of India.
socio-economic
Exactly.
change. You
Yeah,
know,
absolutely. No, I see it is very much a. You see, my Dilip Kumar book just deals with the Dilip Kumar films
yeah.
and the story of Nehru's India and all that. And he liked it very much. I mean, he said to me, because at least I had not talked any gossip about his love affairs and this and that. I just took his film seriously. It was just about his films, not about him, as it were. And it's a. But I am very fond of film. But I like seeing films in the actual cinema. I'm not a Netflix person. I can't sit at home and watch it on TV.
But
I have to be in a crowd.
I'm afraid on that one, you're really going to lose out, isn't it? Because
Exactly, absolutely. Well, lately, this year, I haven't seen anything because the cinema is shut very often. But it'll come back. Cinema is not going to go away, and I think the joy of watching a large screen is just something else again. Maybe I'm just being old-fashioned.
No, that's a very good point. Mind you, a lot of the the cell phone guys like to believe that people will be watching all movies on the cell phone. And actually, I am surprised at how many people are watching movies on the cell phone because the convenience is.
But if I were a cameraman, I would despair because then I was trying to take a lovely, beautiful shot, and somebody's going to get it in this thing. What am I doing here?
I know, but I mean, you can get a pretty big shot in a big screen in your own home without necessarily.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think a lot of Netflix is not easily ruled out because of the desire to go back to cinemas. Let me touch on something else, which I think you mentioned and you touch upon and then you leave, and that is that when you looked at India, I mean, you had the sense that everybody's thinking of India as a single unit, whereas actually the states are hugely different. I mean, it was my experience also when I was in the Planning Commission that, we didn't pay enough attention to the fact that the dynamics of states at different levels of development would actually be quite different.
Yeah.
So you wanted to write up something about these differences, but that your friends from the left went completely berserk, as if you were somehow splitting India up. So do you want to tell us what forced them to keep insisting that India is one country and there are no differences, and what damage does that do?
I think two things. For me, the most important influence was living through the linguistic states movement in Mumbai, Sangita Maharashtra, and how the whole idea of Sangita Maharashtra was completely overwhelming. And then the Maha Gujarat thing happened, and there are a lot of ferment in the 50s. So I began to think that these were kind of, almost like separate nations. So at that time, I began to think of India as a collection of nations, because thinking of nation as anything which has a language and a territory. It may have a religion as well. I mean, the interesting thing about Bangladesh, which happened around about that time, was that religion was not enough. Language made all the difference. So language is sort of culture. So I began to think India is large enough. India is sort of Europe. India is Europe. And so and Europe has just come together in a union, not still a nation. Why not? You see, what happened with the left is that that is what the British used to say. Why are you taking the British line? The British used to say, India is not a nation. You're taking a British line. You're an imperialist. On the right, the same thing is that the Hindu nationalists are saying, how could you say that? How different? I said, let me, one of the big books I'm doing right now is really showing how diverse Indian history is. If you don't just talk about the Delhi Sultanate, everybody thinks India is just the Doab and Delhi and the Muslim kingdoms and so on. Is there nothing about Assam? I mean, who knows any history about Assam or about Kerala? So I want to make people aware that, relax, India is a nation state. It's not going to go anywhere else, but let's understand the different dynamics. If nothing else, because the land tenure systems were different. I was talking about land tenure system, and somebody said, you can't talk about that. We have had a land reform. That's all gone. So anyway, I feel that one should be relaxed, because there's always this balkanization fear and all that. We should all be relaxed. India is not going to go away anywhere. India is a united civilization full of many nations. It's rich in nationhood. I think that is much more friendly than everybody march to the same tune. And I mean, I read a lot of South Indian history as part of my my training, and also I read a lot of history of Northeast. The only time I've been to Assam uh, to debate with Joseph Stiglitz about globalization, don't ask me why, but anyway, there on invitation. Uh, some the people said, "How is the mainland thinking about us? Is the mainland thinking about us? Seriously, is the mainland thinking about us? Because they feel cut off." Anyway, uh, so
Yeah, no,
this is.
but I can see why if
I think
you
the left was basically decided that one nation, two classes, the capitalists and the workers, and nothing else is allowed in this.
yeah.
Partly because
No,
none of them have read Marx.
I think I can understand that some people might worry if you start defining the
Sure.
problem as many nations, because
Yeah,
that's sort of what they would
that
say
led to split. Sure,
negotiable.
sure.
These are regional areas with regional cultural differences. That's in one nation, many cultures is quite acceptable. But certainly
One of the things is,
one nation,
sorry, yeah,
many
go ahead.
economies. I mean,
No,
the between the richest and the poorest state, it's a ratio of per capita income is 5:1.
yeah,
And I mean, that's much more than you see in Europe. So in a
of
sense,
course, no.
what we've got is a common market. We've got a common currency. We don't have a
Indeed.
common fiscal situation. We Well, one of the problems really is that if you're going to get economic development, as happened in China, in the first instance will take place in the coastal areas, which are much better connected to the
And
world,
then, yeah,
and historically they've been the more advanced and so on. Well, it's a very important part of that you should have migration.
indeed.
In other words, we shouldn't be expecting that you're going to narrow down per capita GDP, but you could actually narrow down income differentials as people
Sure.
move for job, which they do already. Although
Yeah,
I must
indeed.
say that, I mean, the COVID pandemic revealed the vulnerabilities that created
Absolutely.
when this is happening in an informal sector with no social safety net, etc. I mean, this is not a problem of the current government. It's been there all the time, but we just realized it when we're faced with this shock. And the same thing will
Sure.
happen if you have another shock.
Sure.
But my old friend, the late Sudhir Mulji, once
Hmm.
wrote when people were talking about lack of resources in, I think the state that they had in mind at that time was Bihar. I mean, Mulji said, what you need in India is every state should have its own currency. So in a way, he was emphasizing the fact that
Exactly.
single currency was imposing restrictions on states. Otherwise, he felt that Bihar could happily print more and more of his own currency, and of course, it would depreciate.
Yes.
That you would live with the consequences of that. So I think analyzing Indian economic problems while recognizing that India is a highly integrated set of very different economies with very different levels of actually education, very different levels of industrial sophistication, infrastructure access, etc. We need a lot more of that than we actually have.
Yeah, but let me say this. AMCP, which is where people are demonstrating about, is exactly not setting up a single market for food grains across India. And we got GST after a lot of trouble because
Yeah,
until GST came, we didn't have a single market.
yeah,
We had a single currency with not a single market. And I think one of the Indian revolution happening slowly is making India not just a political single unit, but an economic single unit. Uh, I,
absolutely. Absolutely.
and
I think, anything can become political. I mean,
yeah, exactly,
go back 3 or 4 years, the idea that you need to modernize agricultural markets was subscribed to by all of us
exactly,
for years. So this is not new.
absolutely.
I mean, but naturally, what becomes political, I mean, I was going to say you politicians decide since you're a politician.
Exactly.
Although I should say, I should put on record that you've actually resigned from the Labour Party on
Yes.
an issue of principle because you think that they
Yeah.
were anti-Semitic. You
Yeah.
want to tell
Sorry.
us about that? I mean, what led to? Does this mean you no longer sit with Labour peers and you're now
No,
moved to the
I sit among
crossbenches?
the crossbenchers. I sit
Okay,
on
but
the
tell us.
crossbenches.
You obviously don't mention this in the book because it's happened
No,
recently.
it happened afterward. It happened
Tell,
only a month ago. Only happened a month ago.
tell us what happened.
On the 19th of November. I think basically what happened was that when we had a leftward shift with in 2015 with Jeremy Corbyn elected, and lots of people came in who were there before the 70s, 80s, sort of Trotskyists and people like that. Now, the 1970s, 80s Trotskyists were, okay, they were radical and all that. We could deal with them. We dealt with them. I was chairman of my party at that time. But this new bunch, partly because of social media, are very anti-Semitic or something else. They're very anti-Semitic. And they throw abuse at Jewish MPs, especially Jewish women MPs and so on. We were cited again and again as a party by the Jewish Board of Deputies saying, do something about this. Now, somebody said anti-Semitism is the socialism of fools. Someone said Marx said it, but I'm not sure about that. So I think they somehow, the Jews are capitalists and all that sort of stuff. So the party was reluctant to proceed against them. And so the party got reported to the Commission on Human Rights and Equality. And the commission said, about 2 months ago, that yes, the party had a problem with anti-Semitism. I was feeling very embarrassed about this. The final report came. At that stage, our former leader said, oh, this is not serious, this is political propaganda. He was suspended. And then in 19 days later, he was readmitted. I said, this is it. I'm now no longer going to be, because these guys are not serious about tackling anti-Semitism. Everybody, a lot of people called me up and said, please don't go. We need you, stay here and fight. And I said, if you're not going to even be able to suspend somebody for saying something, so dismissing this idea, somebody who's responsible, I don't think you'll get anywhere. And so somehow, I thought about this. I thought, I don't need this hassle. I can do my own thinking and I can my own writing, and having been in the House of Lords, I'm never going to become a cabinet minister anyway. So so it doesn't matter. So, and it was taken note of, but it's all right. I'm more free than before.
Are you the first party life peer who's resigned from the party?
Well, on this issue, I may be actually the first. Not many people have resigned from the party. I'm also the first Labour peer of Asian origin. And so I have a small distinction in history books. No, so I resigned, and I wasn't expecting to make a big splash. I just wanted to be comfortable with my own conscience. I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed about the party's anti-Semitism.
Let me raise one other question, which
Sure.
I'm sure the audience would want to hear your views on, and I don't think you go into that at great length in the book or even touch upon it, and that is the whole business of Brexit.
Yes, indeed.
Now, that's happening since 2016 or so.
Yeah.
So tell us about Brexit. What are your view on Brexit? Is it sensible?
Well, I do say a little bit about that. I voted Remain because I didn't like the enlargement of the European Union. I did not like the eastward march. I wanted a deep Europe of 15. So I was somewhat alienated and I mentioned how I talked to Robin Cook about it and so on. But then what happened was that I took the view that while I voted Remain, if the referendum said Brexit, leave, then I have to support leave as a legislator.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of people in my party and a lot of other Remainers, Liberal Party and so on, more or less took the view that the ignorant masses have voted Brexit, but we can't let the ignorant masses do this. We were lied to and all this sort of stuff, I mean, every time you lose an election, you think the winners lied. I mean, I thought, oh, that's not serious. But every time I spoke in the House a lot since, I said, whatever my views, we have to deliver Brexit. Now, my party just went berserk, especially in the House of Lords, trying to have a withdrawal bill which was more or less like not leaving at all. And I just didn't speak on it. I obeyed the whip and so on. So I sort of thought that, it's a very peculiar attitude, very elitist attitude. That the people may have voted, but who are the bloody people? We are the people who know who are coming. So I was maybe one of the reasons why I left, which I did not say openly, was that I was being very uncomfortable in a party which sort of can't live with. I know, okay, you can say people have decided and they will regret it. But you will remember that a lot of the independence movement in ex-colonies used to be told, don't ask for independence, you will be miserable, you will be misruled, your income will decline, But we still said, no, we want independence, as John Stuart Mill said, self-governance is better than good governance. So, I feel, if that's okay, there'll be problems, we'll figure it out. But you can't deny people what they have voted for on the ground they're always dishonest, this and that. So I thought, no, I'm a Democrat, and if people have decided to go, they have to be given what they wanted. That is my duty as a legislator.
One of the things people talk about when they worry about the global economy is the perception that the intellectual consensus on which the global economy was built has kind of frayed away in the West and more or less everywhere. And we are seeing consequences of that also. Do you think that the new president in the United States can make any difference, or are these trends so deeply entrenched? And some of them predated the Trump presidency. Still, people do make a difference. Will Biden make a difference in some way?
I think, to me, Biden seems to be hankering after the old status quo. He feels that, let's get back to 2016. And this is the third term of Obama. But the world has changed profoundly. And I think unless he understands not just deglobalization, but the weakening of American economy. You see, Trump, whatever people may say, was not actually stupid. When he says, make America great again, what he was saying, America was no longer as great as it used to be. Now, what we hear now is this massive cyber attack on America, which is just come out. And the Russians have decided we can't fight them militarily. We are going to destroy them cyber wars. Now, that is what, and what Trump said, I'm no longer fighting for the other guys who would build their own military. I'm tired of this. Trump didn't start a single foreign war in his 4 years. He may have started wars at home. So I think there is now a conflict within America as to whether they still want to be the global policeman. But given how strong China is, and you see America behaving about China like India behaved about Coca-Cola. Remember, we threw out Coca-Cola, right? For the first time, America is feeling threatened by competition, technological competition from somebody else. And, to take away TikTok and sell it. I think it's a country standing for capitalism, in a free market capitalism, can behave like, sort of nationalized foreign capital. I mean, the world has changed. The world is changing. And I think but Biden is going to have a much more difficult time. And I was told there's a nice word. It's called heteropolity. It used to be Cold War with two powers. Then one power dropped out. We had a single power dominance. Now it's heteropolity because the power is no longer dominant. And all sorts of there's G10s and the Quad and this and that, and so I think Biden is going to have a more difficult time than he thinks.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm aware that we are running out of time, and you have I was told that there will be lots of people wanting to ask questions. So let me ask Priyanshi, do we have questions from others that are hooked on? And would you like to pose them to Meghnad?
Yes, absolutely. So the first question is from Artika Bakshi. She says, my question is addressed to both the respected speakers. Given that you both have served in the public arena and made a difference, how can more people with national service as their prime objective be encouraged to join politics and public office, especially given the state today?
Well, my view is that you have to have two things. Within you, you have to desire that I want to do something to change the world. My own local world, I may care about human rights, I may care about climate change, I may care about animal rights, whatever it is. But then the domestic political structure has to allow you to be able to do that work. Now, you see, I've never been in any Indian political party, but in my political party, we used to meet every month at the local level and at the constituency level. We used to discuss politics, all that. In India, I feel parties only come alive at time of elections, and people join parties to get legislative seats. And that the politics which should happen away from elections, in between elections, and really be a discussion among people. I don't know much of that happens, but I would say, yes, you have to just, I spend a lot of time. I spend a lot of my own time in politics is very time consuming, and the reward of being in politics is the experience itself, not success as a member of parliament. That would be my view. Montek has never been in politics. He's been in public service.
I don't know whether the questioner had in mind elected office or just going and joining government. Now, if you just want to work in the public service area, I join government, then the routes are very well defined. I mean, you sit for whatever the examinations are, hope to get in and do the best you can. But there's a broader sense that people want to get involved, and that is sort of join the debate on issues. And there, quite frankly, you can join NGOs that pick up very specific issues and contribute. You could join research institutions which pose issues of policy for a broader audience to pick up. And I mean, you could join political parties and seek elected office or support others seeking elected office. I think, to my mind, I mean, when I was young, most people just wanted a job and they preferred a secure job. And I'm quite sure that for the country, we need younger people thinking more broadly than that. I mean, even those who are not interested in public office are no longer always thinking of secure jobs, because they realize that the world is changing so rapidly, that most of them will have more than one job. Whereas when I was a young person, you kind of assumed you got in at the bottom and you worked your way up the greasy pole. I mean, today, if you're being interviewed and you say, I spent 25 years in a particular company, they probably think you've got something wrong with you. Whereas if you say, I've had a very varied career, I've done this and I've done that and so on, you come out better. So really, I think it's not easy to tell a young person what it is they should do, because there's so many different things they can do. But I mean, I would just say that, look, try it. And if you like it, go ahead and do more. But there's no one thing that you have to solve the problem in my generation, your parents decided, are you going to be an engineer or a doctor?
Exactly.
That's not the world we live in. Today, even people who become doctors are joining the Indian Administrative Service, and for all I know, will go into a wide range of other things.
I mean, whatever you do, even in working in a private sector, is a good thing.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
don't
no,
have
of
just
course.
to be in public service. You know,
Yeah, I agree. I
do
agree.
your best, and you're doing public service.
Thank you so much for answering. The next question we have is from Surabhi. Good evening, sir. My question to you was, do you think India will strengthen its ties during the leadership of Biden as a president of USA and get the same support while President Trump was in power?
That's an interesting question. I think India and America are very strongly bound in a military relationship with each other. It may be formal or not, but I think India and America have a military understanding ever since the prime ministership of Manmohan Singh and the presidency of George Bush. I think there will be probably differences because Biden is, as it were, on the soft left of American politics, and Donald Trump was on the populist right of American politics, and therefore there may be differences between Narendra Modi and Joe Biden. I definitely think that on questions of human rights or Kashmir and so on, there will be differences. And I think I say that without any reservation because there already have been differences, even when Trump was president, with the congressional Democratic members in America. So I don't think Kamala Harris is going to be absolutely 24/7 friend of India. She has her own views on many of these things.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Dr. Bhavya Soni. How should India deal with China?
Well, I think the way we have been dealing, because in a sense, it would be nice if it could just be peaceful, good trade relationships and all that, but that is long past. I think what we have to understand is that there is no solution to the India-China boundary problem. And I will say this frankly, basically, Chinese nationalism believes that that territory belongs to China. And it was taken away by the British from China, from Tibet, which was at that time, only weakly aligned with China. We believe that this territory, our territory, because when India became independent, that was Indian territory. Now, it's a clash of two very deep nationalisms, two old countries. And I don't think there's any way any country can afford to lose any territory in this day and age. So how we are going to reconcile is very difficult. My only wish is that we don't get into a seriously violent war. And if you could somehow just concentrate on other things, areas of cooperation, it would be very fine. But I worry about India-China relationships. And when I was young, I was another teenager. We lived through Hindi Chini Bye Bye and all that stuff, and got disappointed. And so at that time, I read up a lot about this boundary territory problem, and I think it's a very difficult problem to solve. Sorry to say.
Thank you for sharing your thoughts. In the interest of time, Mr. Aluwale, if you have any concluding questions, you may please go ahead and ask.
Well, I think let me ask Meghnad to speculate looking forward. There was, as a result of the reforms and through many different governments, including especially the Vajpayee government, the basic thrust of the reforms, which was to liberalize the domestic economy, get rid of restrictions on the private sector, open up to foreign investment and to foreign technology, and also to foreign trade, they were continued. And I think that from 1991 through the end of the NDA period, they continued. When the UPA came in, obviously the same policies continued. I would say that they didn't do as much as they could have to further reduce tariffs, because the original target that had been set was that we should reach ASEAN level of tariffs, and this was completed by the United Front government and by the Vajpayee government. I think the UPA could have done a better job on that, but tariffs were then quite low, and while negotiating for RCEP, etc., there was less progress there. But otherwise, broadly, the same reform thing continued. And over this period, growth has gone up and down. The world has had some impact on it, but there was an expectation that India pretty much could hope to grow between 7.5% to 8%. Okay. Towards the end of the UPA, the growth rate dropped, but then it was beginning to pick up. In the first 3 years of the Modi NDA, the growth rate picked up, and then it sort of decelerated. Now, COVID is an exceptional thing, so I don't think we should bother too much. I mean, we have to bother, but we shouldn't be too surprised that this year's growth rate is so low. But the pre-COVID growth rate, the average is around 5%. The question to ask is, of course, the economy will recover. Probably if we drop by 8% this year and we recover another by 8% next year, we'll only get back to where we were in 2019-20. Now, everybody has a right to claim that this is a fantastic recovery, but the real question is not whether we'll get back in a year. The real question is, after we've recovered, are we stuck at 5%? Or is there some chance of going up to 7.5% and 8%? Now, it's quite clear to me that, if we want to deliver to the public and particularly to younger people the kind of growth of jobs that they expect, and good quality jobs, really a growth rate of about 7.5%, hopefully 8%, but at least 7.5% is essential. So what would be your bet? Are we heading in that direction? And what are the 4 or 5 things that we really need to fix in order to get there?
Yeah, I think, you're very right. Say from 1991 to about 2016, 2017, more or less, it is a golden period of Indian growth. There's no doubt. I think in the 2016 to 2019, the credit market completely, utterly misbehaved. And I actually say that it's a growth cycle. There's a downward growth cycle. I said to one of the finance minister person, it's a Vixel Hayek cycle. He said, "What's Vixel Hayek?" I said, "Look it up in Google on it. I'm not going to tell you." The cost of lending is become very high because borrowers don't pay back. And both in the banking sector and non-banking sector, we have seen ILF has collapsed and other. And that part of the economy is a very developed part of the economy. Unless that economy really is cleaned up in terms of bank credit, unless it's easy to lend money and borrow money, and money, if you borrow, you pay back, and not have a long judicial process. That reform is really the primary. In the meantime, and this is entirely my effect, I think we have this return of attack of national self-sufficiency, which wrecked the early years of Indian independence, all the planning in national self-sufficiency and Atmanirbharta and so on. I feel very uncomfortable whether it is really a healthy thing or is it back to tariffs and quotas and being nasty to foreign capital and so on. I hope I'm wrong, but I think India has, if you get a credit market cleaned up, if you build a good welfare state for the migrant laborer, That's another thing we have to do. I mean, we have sort of a narega for the migrant laborer, say 100 days guarantee of unemployment benefit, which I have advocated. I think India has enormous potential. It could be growing at 9 to 10%. There's absolutely no reason why not. And I think we just need to know that India is not special. India is just like any other country, and it has to do what other countries have done to grow. You just look at ASEAN countries, and Asia is the key to how to grow. Asia is already provided. We be friendly with business, cooperate with business, value business. I think in Indian political parties, nobody values business. Nobody has a good word to say about profit making. Everybody just is kind of hostile to business, from CPM to RSS. I mean, there's no friend of the businessman. And I think that has to stop. We really have to say, making profit is a good thing. The farmers are not farmers. The farmers are private sector businessmen, and they should make money. And it's a good thing to make money, as long as you do it legally. I think that kind of attitude change is required. And I don't want India to be Jagat Guru. I don't give a monkey about being Jagat Guru. I want India to have a decent per capita income, no poverty, good health, no gender discrimination. Being Jagat Guru is a luxury.
Well,
So I think I'm optimistic about India. I'm optimistic about India. I'm not pessimistic.
good. Well, that's a good note to end the discussion on. Thank you very much, Meghnad. Always a pleasure talking to you, and may you keep talking and
Thank you,
writing.
Man.
And let me thank the organizers for inviting me to join. And certainly, I learned a lot from what Meghnad had to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Montek. Thank you very much, Montek.
Bye-bye.
And thanks, Priyanshi. Yeah.
And
Thanks,
thank you,
Priyanshi.
Thank you, Lord.
Anindita,
Thank you, Lord
yeah.
Desai. Thank you, Mr. Ahluwalia. A
Thank
big
you.
thank you to Prabha Khaitan Foundation for always bringing in wonderful sessions, and Westland Publishers for today.
Thank you.
Well, good night all.
Take care.
Okay.
Enjoy the
Bye.
weekend. Enjoy
Bye.
the weekend.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you,
Take
sir.
care.